If we're quiet, if we listen, we can hear houses breathe. We say haunted, but we mean the house has gone insane.
From the imagination of Stephen King comes a disturbing new epic tale.
There are rumors that you're planning a scientific investigation of Rose Red this summer, a sort of psychic field trip. Is that true?
For Professor Joyce Reardon.
My goal is modest. A single twitch.
It's time to stop the silliness.
The truth is out there.
When I come back from Rose Red with proof, you...
It's sleaze. It's a spit in the eye of rational thought.
Now she has assembled a team of gifted psychics.
Hello, are you the group?
I think we're ready.
To unravel the secret.
Waking up Rose Red is not a good idea.
Rose Red is a dangerous place.
That was built to last.
Rose Red was built by John P. Rimbauer.
What makes Rose Red one of the world's most fascinating psychic artifacts is that after 1950, Rose Red grew on its own. Follow me and prepare to be amazed.
So I have a weird fascination, and I'll even say love, for Stephen King. I've read a lot of his books. I couldn't say all of them because I have to do other things with my life. But I do consider myself a fan while acknowledging that he's sometimes problematic. But I'm a fan of him as a writer of novels and short stories. I do not think having Stephen King necessarily as your screenwriter is a good thing. That said...
Maximum Overdrive?
Maximum Overdrive. There's plenty of examples. That said, the way some people have a weird affection for, like, I don't know, Star Trek The Next Generation, which, if we're real, just isn't a good show, or for, I don't know, some derivative 90s TV show. I kind of have this weird fascination for all of these made-for-TV adaptations of Stephen King that happened throughout the 90s. This Rose Red movie we're going to talk about was actually in 2002, but throughout the 90s you were basically getting these Coles Notes PGized versions of Stephen King. They're basically making Stephen King, which is absolutely horrifying, accessible to a TV audience. And I don't know, I've always enjoyed watching them especially when they were airing. I would get really excited about them. And I have this weird affection for them, even though I know a lot of them are bad. We reviewed Sometimes They Come Back, and it was just an atrocious movie. But for some reason I enjoyed watching it. I don't know what that says about me. So when we come to this Rose Red miniseries, which was aired over 3 nights, and as we watch it now, that gets to almost 4.5 hours of running time. Basically, we have Stephen King's take on The Haunting of Hill House, basically. He's riffing on that. And he brings a huge cast of characters, and in his typical television adaptation ways, he says, TV giveth in giving him more length and more room to tell the story that he wants, but it taketh away in his ability to use the level of violence and language and sex or whatever that he would typically do. And right. So what we get here is sort of a friendlier, cuddlier Stephen King. All of this preamble leading us to the front doors of Rose Red, which is not good. But that's where I come in. I come into this as a fan of Stephen King, even as a fan of his shitty TV movies, as a person who wants to like this. And I don't.
I think you might have kind of nailed it when you were talking about your introduction with Stephen King's 90s adaptations, which were just all over TV throughout the 90s. Rose Red feels like it's behind its time, that it should have been released 5 or 6 years earlier. It feels like a 90s movie that was made too late.
Yeah.
And so it's just got that 90s TV aesthetic, which it doesn't work at this point.
Yeah. It's not scary. And worse than that, I think that it is a mix of borrowed elements. Stephen King is left and right stealing from either himself or from Shirley Jackson or from genuinely interesting historical things. You know about I believe it's the
Winchester?
Winchester house, yeah. This woman believed that she was going to be haunted by all the people who died from Winchester rifles, but she somehow thought that they could only haunt your house if you were living in a completed house. So her house never finished construction. That's something that's borrowed in Rose Red. The opening of the movie, where we have a psychic child causing a rain of rocks to fall on a house after she's been bitten by a dog, is ripped right out of the pages of Carrie. This character that we have of this unbelievable mother's boy who has hidden sort of talents is Harold Lautner from The Stand, just repurposed in another story. We're seeing other characters ripped out of other stories and thrown into this significantly less interesting one.
Yeah, one of the things that I appreciated about this for a while, and maybe I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of Stephen King that you do, so there's like an ensemble group of psychics in this obviously haunted house, and I thought it was kind of interesting to see their dynamics play off of each other for a while. So this was almost 4 hours. I watched it over the course of a night, and then the next morning when I went to bed after 2 hours, I was still I didn't love it, but I was still kind of into it because I thought the characters were interesting enough in their ways. Some of their dynamics were okay. The character that you're talking about, Emery, who is the nerd psychic, I thought he was overacting a little bit too much.
Agreed.
Sometimes he managed to reel it in a little bit, but mostly I think he was overplaying the character. But he was still kind of interesting to me. I was curious to see where he would go, if he was going to be secretly a helpful character, secretly a hindrance. And one of the nice things we could say about this is, even though he was too much at times, and a lot of times, I thought his character arc was kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, and I think that this type of character is something that Stephen King really likes, right? This nerdy, misunderstood, intelligent, but, flawed character.
And kind of like a bully and a victim of bullying.
Yeah, he's a bully because he had been a victim, basically.
Yeah. But the first time we're introduced to him, he's a psychic that's going to go to this house, and he's at home eating whipped cream out of the fridge, and then he turns around, and all of the fridge is just covered in blood, and there's horrible apparitions coming out, and he seems sort of annoyed, and he tells them not to bother him because he needs the money. So, don't try to scare me away. I'm going to get paid $5,000 to investigate this house. And I kind of liked that moment. I thought it was a scare that seemed not scary to me, a little bit heavy-handed. So I liked the way that he was just sort of disinterested in it.
I like, again, I've seen that character before and done better. That's sort of where I begin and end with Emery. Some of the more problematic things, too, is, for me, the main character, played by Nancy Travis, her Dr. Joyce Reardon. She's supposed to have this huge sort of tragic arc where she is sort of driven insane by this need to prove this supernatural stuff. And I've seen Nancy Travis in other movies. I've got a soft spot for So I Married an Axe Murderer, and I don't think she's a bad actress, but I'm kind of embarrassed for her in some of the scenes in this movie. And I don't even think it's her fault. I think some of the dialogue is just ear crushing.
I think whoever was directing this, he was getting them to overact, because she was overacting. The crusty old head of her department.
Yeah.
She's a professor of psychology, is it?
Yeah.
And her department head thinks that she's wasting money and wants to deny her tenure, have her tenure revoked. He was just way too evil, way too obtuse. Very similar, actually, to the psychiatrist in Poltergeist 3. Both of them were they were being pushed, I assume, by the directors to go past the point of skepticism right to outright hostility.
The ghost should be enough of a villain. We don't need to bring in these extra outside sources of villains. And again, this is Stephen King stealing from himself, right? The interesting thing about that, too, Matthew, is that the actor who was playing the Mr. Cooper character at the university died midway through the production. He had a heart attack playing tennis, dropped dead. So his whole closing element that was going to be happening in the second act had to be retrofitted, and all of a sudden Emery's mother started to take a bigger role in the
that makes sense.
in the later part of it. So some of the problems with Rose Red didn't necessarily have to do with, the writing of the production. When you're halfway through this, huge production and you lose one of your cast members, that's really hard to course correct. It's not an excuse, it's a reason. It's a reason, or one of the reasons why I think this thing falls.
Could be. I mean, I think he was overacting anyway.
Agreed.
As was sort of everybody in this. One of the bright shining spots was Melanie Lynskey.
Yay!
Who is... I just rewatched her first movie, Heavenly Creatures, the Peter Jackson movie, which was so good that
it's an amazing
she
movie.
Still has, after all of those years on 3.5 Men or 2.5 Men, she still hasn't burnt all of her goodwill.
No.
I still like seeing her in things.
Every now and then I'll bump into Melanie Lynskey, and I'm always happy to see her. And again, she's got a fairly thankless role here, but I think she does well with it.
Yeah, and she's, I think, the only character or the only actor that's not overacting in this movie. I think her performance is appropriate.
Yeah.
She's the older sister of... talking about pet peeves.
The autistic child.
Younger sister is autistic in that... I would say it's very 90s, but I think it still goes on, where people's understanding of autism is that it's kind of a superpower, and so she's like autistic in this really lame, filmic kind of way. So I thought the younger sister, who, again, child actor, I think, with not a very good actor's director, she does what she can, but I thought Melanie Lynskey as the older sister did a pretty good job.
Yeah, and it's another one of those really cringy things with the autistic kid or whatever, that she's basically as, quote, autistic as she needs to be in any given scene.
Yeah, she gets less autistic
Yeah.
when she deals with the handsome hero.
Yeah. Matt Kiesler, the, quote, handsome hero who's hooked up romantically with the Nancy Travis character, is another actor who I like and I think is decent, who's once again trapped in a movie that's not so great, which seems to be Matt Kiesler's lot in life. Some of Stephen King's dialogue that, when you read it in a book, it would be fine, Russian hand and Roman fingers, or just weird turns of phrase that he likes to use and repeat. I find a lot of times in the books, you can sort of auto-correct it in your own brain to make it work. But when he tries to ham-fistedly squeeze that into a screenplay, it's way worse in the televised TV version of The Shining. But there's some of it going on in here too, where people say things to themselves or just generally that just nobody would say that. Nobody would ever talk that way to themselves or anyone else. It breaks any reality to it.
Also, at the beginning of every episode, there's a shot of the house where Nancy Travis does some ominous voiceover.
Right.
And some of the stuff she says is just ridiculous. I wrote down this one line, and she's like, I guess saying these profound aphoristic things that don't make sense. She says, as our bodies grow old, so too do our houses. Like, yeah, okay.
You mean everything gets older at the same time?
Actually, your body gets, it seems to get withered quicker than a house would, but, sure, who would disagree? Time passes, and so that happens to houses.
Yeah.
But it's just filled with it. Like, if you just ran together all of her voiceover dialogue, it would just be, 5 minutes of just what the fuck aphorisms, stuff that's not necessarily not true, but is not worth saying.
And the time that we spent setting up all of these different psychic investigators and how they have different things. The one woman, of the family tree of Deschanel, whenever she touches an object, she can sort of find out things about the past. Or another woman has this writing skills where she can write and communicate to the ghosts. And the older fellow has this precognition where he can sort of anticipate things that are going to happen a few seconds before they do. But they don't do anything with those few characters. They spend a lot of time setting them up, but once they're in the house, they're either just wiped off the table right away or in a different room for the bulk of this what we're shown. So, I don't know. It's another one of these movies that I feel the potential to the left and right. I don't think the cast sucks, but I think that they're having a real hard time. And 4.5 hours, it's kind of punishing. But here's the weird thing,
I
Matt.
don't think that that's really that fair to criticize its length because, I mean, it is a miniseries, right?
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't criticize the bad season of American Horror Story because it's 13 hours or whatever.
Well, I guess I see what you're saying. But the weird thing to me is that I'm saying all of these terrible things about Rose Red, and I've gone through that journey. This was probably my 4th or 5th time. And I know for some fucking reason, maybe not soon, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, I'll get it into my head that maybe I should give Rose Red another try. Maybe this time it will be the movie I hope it to be. I have a problem when it comes to Stephen King, but I don't not to the point where I'll make excuses for it, right? Much the way a Star Trek fan loves the Star Trek The Next Generation or loves the original series, but in their heart will concede that there's a lot of shit there. I love Stephen King, but there's a lot of shit there. And as example, Rose Red.
After having watched the first 2 episodes of this, kind of binge watching it one night, starting at around midnight, so I was getting pretty sleepy, I kind of wanted to put in the last disc and see how things played out. So there's not really much good that I can say about it exactly, but
it keeps you watching it.
Watching it, I didn't like the way it ended. Excuse me. The last disc the last episode was certainly the weakest, but there was something, I don't know what it was, some sort of X factor that was kind of interesting. Another thing about the characters, there was the handsome British guy from Arachnophobia, who's, I think he was also Warlock in the Warlock movie.
Julian Sands is his name.
He was really interesting too in some ways with his dynamic with Emery, because he was like handsome, kind of heroic, really nice to the autistic girl, but mean to Emery, meaner than he had to be. Emery was kind of mean to the autistic girl, so Julian Sands was kind of defending her, but then his behavior went full on into bullying behavior as well. So their dynamic was kind of interesting, and I just liked watching the way the characters played off of each other.
Yeah. I was saying that I think that Julian Sands actually, performance-wise, can hold his head relatively high. I mean, he didn't have as many tough lines to choke out as some of the other ones, but as a rule, I've never been a huge Julian Sands fan, so I kind of was surprised that I liked his character as much as I did, comparably anyway. But what I will say about Rose Red is this. For as long as it does hold my attention, and I have watched it several times. And as a piecemeal, if somebody wasn't into Stephen King, they could watch this, and unbeknownst to them, they're getting a little piece of Carrie, and they're getting a little piece of The Shining, and they're getting little pieces of other things from the Stephen King universe that I think are legit and interesting. They're just way more legit and interesting in the source material than they're ever going to be in a made-for-TV movie.